I am here with Mike Roberts. Mike, it's great to see you.
Yeah, man, it's great to be back. I love doing these. This is like a best part of my week.
The Google API leak that happened at the end of March and
Yep.
beginning of May. It's been all the buzz around our industry. Mike, you always have interesting perspectives on big happenings in the industry. You've been working in here for what, 20 years? So
Yeah, yeah. But I guess at least, yeah. I'm an old
somewhere in
man,
there.
Patrick. I'm an old man.
So, what are your perspectives on this API leak, and where do we go from here?
All right. So I saw like Rand posted this. I was flipping through like LinkedIn on like a Sunday night, right? Like that's my Sunday night for you, baby. Flipping through LinkedIn. So the so the thing pops in, and I'm like, oh, an API leak. I am such a nerd, right? And like I'm reading through there, and I'm like searching for. I'm like, you know what I need to see is the actual API, right?
Mhm.
Because like I'm a software guy, right? I'm like, okay, I hear there's an API leak. Let me see the actual source code, right? That's just how I roll. I
Mhm.
mean, obviously, it's not an actual API leak; it's API documentation. That's kind of important, but because the code is different, and uh, and so we don't really know how the code is used, right? What we know is that there's these endpoints or these properties, is what they're kind of typically called, and so it'll be like a roll-up value of some kind of a signal, a potential signal, but you don't know really whether or not those signals are actually used in ranking. You know that they're available. And so one thing that we know about like how like these sort of like machine learning algorithms work, in particular um, like DeepMind or whatever, right? Like um, it's going to like take a whole bunch of different types of signals, and there's like, there's signals that are going to be like numbers that are discrete, and so that's like 1 and 5, and so like each one, or there's like continuous, so they've got like a whole range of them, and it takes all of these different types of signals
Uh-huh.
and then tries to find um sorry, these properties, and then tries to find the signal in it, or tries to figure out how to make the right ranking work, right? So it might be the case that they feed in all of these properties and then let the machine learning, the AI, optimize for the outcome that they want, right? So it's like if you take like the team that does the that actually QAs the SERPs, so the human team that actually does it, and
Uh-huh.
they say, here's the optimal order based on what we think. You might train the machine learning to produce that output, or an output that's as close to that as possible. And what you might do is say, here's all the possible factors that you could take into account. Try as many different things as you can, and see if you can output that. And that whole thing is actually a black box to humans. We can't like debug. That's one of the
Mhm.
problems with AI and various types of machine learning, is that we don't really know actually, and Google doesn't know actually what it's doing. So it's possible that all these things are taken into account. It's possible that they have only some of them that are available to developers, just for the sake of like, well, this might be a thing that's interesting. It might
Uh-huh.
be interesting to see what, like the bounce rate is on these pages, but maybe they don't actually expose it to the machine, possibly because some of the signals are like pretty much highly correlated, meaning they're like basically duplicate. Um, what's an example of like a duplicate signal? A signal that would be like very, in this case, like essentially measuring the same thing. One of them might be like, okay, so like kind of an obvious one would be like time on page and bounce rate or something,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Those are going to basically wash out. It's probably going to wind up being one's more like a discrete signal, and one's more of a continuous signal, and ultimately when you try to, they're probably going to have like a correlation coefficient of like almost exactly the same, right? It's almost a perfect match.
Uh-huh.
So they might filter them out like that, but also the algorithms kind of know how to do that. You can just kind of say, here's a bunch of signals, and it'll filter those out. It'll basically ignore the duplicates and not overweight them. The filtering by us, it just saves compute time, and makes it so that the computer doesn't have to work as hard, and ultimately we in that case save electricity and ultimately dolphins.
Yeah.
It'll save the world. So it's a good idea to do those human sort of pruning before you train a AI model, but you don't have to. Usually you can just let the Google's got infinite resources of compute, so not infinite, but so that's how the stuff works. I mean, from the perspective of, we don't know exactly what's going into it, but there's some really interesting elements in there. Some stuff that we've mostly always, a lot of us have like suspected or whatever. But now when you kind of see it in writing, when you see in writing that they pay attention to like to behavior like that happens off the SERP, like how, like when somebody goes to a page, are they spending a lot of time on that page, and are they then coming back? We kind of know that that's a thing. We actually know that helpful content is like, one of the signals that they're trying to get, is does the user's question get answered when they get to that page? Does their query get satisfied, or do they wind up bouncing back or coming back and running a similar search? What we know is that if you can answer all of the user's questions on that page, then that's a good, helpful piece of content, right? So you get this sort of helpful content angle, and that's like reinforced by what we see in the API documentation. Some other things are like that the Chrome data is potentially integrated, meaning Chrome data is integrated. All users that visit the SERP go to some place and they sort of evaluate that data in the context of the SERP. But it also seems there's also really clear kind of compelling, salacious hints that they might be using off SERP, like basically, when you're browsing the internet, and you go to like a page, like they're using that analytics. Like you're not going through Google, you're just going in your browser to a website. And so they might be taking that data into account. We, again, don't know. It's just what the properties and the data sources are called. But let's talk about the implications of that, right? So there's these services that you could pay for, that basically you pay for like users to search for your site, and then like click on, not search for your site, search a keyword, find your site, and then click on it, and then go like sit there, move around, I don't know, just do some things. Hopefully they're using a Chrome browser, and then like and doing that apparently moves you up in the ranks, because Google's using these ranking factors. So that's kind of like it's probable that those things, people say that they work, and there's probably, I think there's like evidence in the documentation that is probably a thing, right? Like that's probably working. But there's also the possibility. So there's also the possibility that if you like promote something, or if somebody comes to your page or your site through other channels that aren't Google, that also might increase the status of that page, the ranking of that page, in Google's eyes. So there's an article by Will Reynolds about the sea of sameness, right? Yeah. You've seen this article?
Yeah. Yep.
The idea here is that you publish content, and then you find the ones that convert well for you, right? That are sort of cornerstone things that actually don't just rank for you, but also have the potential to convert people into buyers. And then you make that content just like really good. You take it to a whole nother level, potentially answering things that like people have never thought of, not just like what's answered on the SERP, but just like really questions and ideas that take that content to another level, with the goal of producing a piece of content that not only do you want to be able to rank on, but that you would also promote, right? That you would actually pay to send people to. So you're kind of like making this ranking landing page info glory thing, right? Like it's a really cornerstone, beautiful piece of content that you would also be willing to drive traffic to via paid, not necessarily Google paid, but some, whatever, maybe social promotion.
Yeah.
Okay. So the interesting thing about that is that um, is that driving that traffic to it might have ranking implications, right?
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, if we were to make our ads, like let's say we make some Facebook ads or whatever, and we make those ads go to, like, instead of going directly to the page, if we make them go to like the SERP, like one of those special Google the Chrome links
Yeah.
where you like highlight your spot in the SERP, and then so you click on it and it actually scrolls you down to it,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you made one of those and then had people, basically drove people to the SERP, and then they click on your thing, clearly that would have those sort of implications. But it may be the case that simply by driving the signal to the page, promoting your own content,
Mm-hmm.
has an effect on ranking. Now, again, I haven't run a test on this or anything. It's just that's a possibility given the API documentation, right? Like if they are taking traffic that doesn't come from Google into account to like sort of inform the ranking signal for the page, then like, does the user on this page stay longer? Do they share it? Do they what happens? What's their behavior? If Google's taking that into account, then promoting pages on your site might drive them up in the ranks, you know?
Uh-huh.
So this is my sort of like takeaway that I haven't seen anybody else notice, and um, I'm kind of interested to do some of that experimentation, but we haven't done it yet. Like I like a control would be kind of an interesting one to do there.
Mm-hmm. So just so I understand this completely, what you're suggesting is just the act of you promoting a piece of content that you care about and everything, but just the act of promoting it, whether it's on Google or not, is a signal to Google that you're doubling down on it, and you think that might affect rankings. Am I understanding that?
Well, I'm not saying that the act, like buying an ad and promoting something, isn't going to necessarily, like, the fact that there's an ad pointing to the page isn't a signal, right?
Okay.
Like, what is a signal is if Chrome users in particular go to the page by whatever means,
Okay.
like once they get there, if they stay there and they dwell on the page, let's say, or they share it or something. Obviously, sharing it creates a link and all that stuff, but
Mm.
let's just pretend that all that matters is how long they're on the page. Let's say that the only thing that matters is dwell time or page view time or time on page or something like that. Like they go to the page, they sit there and they look at it for a while, they don't bounce, right? So they're there. What I'm saying is it might not matter whether that view, that dwell time, came from the SERP, right? It's just saying this is a strong page, it's a good page, high quality content. If their goal is to produce high quality content and that page is in their can address the query, then they might bump that page up. Like, I again, I don't know, but this is nobody knows how all of this these ranking signals, this API documentation like fits together. But if they're taking Chrome traffic in general into account, which is in there, then
Yeah.
this would be a potential way to increase your ranking. So it's kind of an interesting thing because if you've got a piece of content that you're willing to promote, that you feel like you could maybe break even on, it's certainly worth testing to see if doing that increases your rankings, like totally worth doing, right?
Yeah.
But oftentimes the pages that we're willing to promote are definitely like less geared towards ranking, So like they're landing pages, they're not really like these, or they're not they're optimized for conversion. They're not optimized for like the depth of the content or the richness or the ranking ability of it, like if you like, you'll drive. So as an example, we'll tend to drive traffic to two things, like a landing page that addresses a specific user need, and that's like something that is built around the search intent, or sorry, like the pre-ad signal. Oh no. The like so what's the messaging on the ad? If the messaging on the ad is like, hey, improve your existing, well, are you like a SEO agency? Do you want to improve the rankings on your clients' ads? Right. Okay. So like if that's our I don't know. I'm like it's like an audio ad or whatever, like on the radio. Hey, are you anyway? So if that's the pre-click messaging, then we would want to align our landing page. Like it would say, you're an SEO agency. You want to improve the rankings of your of your existing content, right? That's something that RivalFlow might say. So we would land them on that landing page. So for us, we're driving traffic to either landing pages or homepage. We're not typically driving traffic to like our thought leadership blog articles or something. But what I'm saying is you might be able to get lift by doing that.
And particularly lift because of the signals that Chrome is sending back to Google. Lift
Right.
off the SERP entirely, but only because of Chrome, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
So you'd want to target only Chrome users.
Yeah. So how
don't target Safari, or don't target like Firefox or whatever, because that's not going to do the same thing.
So that's fascinating. That's fascinating. Leveraging. So okay, so let's say the two things I want to know is, one, we don't know if this is true. How would one test this and be able to separate like Chrome data and be able to analyze that? And then my second question, I don't know which one I would rather have answered. Let's just assume your hypothesis is true. This leak happened. They're getting Chrome data. We know that they're getting like Pogo data and like bounce rate data and all that stuff. So let's just assume it's true. How would you leverage that? Is it simply advertising, promoting on Chrome, or?
So first, what you would do is basically take some of that content and make it so that at least you can break even, right? I would think that the goal would be to be able to break even on that content by sending traffic to it, or come close to break even, right? So you want to make it so that it like it's great, deep, like well thought out, sort of grail content. But you also need to probably be able to convert customers with it, convert browsers into customers somehow, I would think. Or if you wanted to run an isolated test, that just makes it sustainable from my perspective. If you felt like you wanted to just like take something that's a pretty good piece of content and drive a bunch of like ad traffic to it, this would be a fine way of testing to see if you get any change in the SERP results. The thing is that you need to make sure that what you're pushing the traffic to actually has a good signal, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, let's say that you just take like a blog article that's pretty good. It doesn't rank well. Well, why doesn't it rank well? It might not rank well because it's not actually a very good piece of content. So you're in this like catch-22, right?
Yeah.
It might not rank well because it actually doesn't answer the user's questions. It might not so behaviorally, people might go there, not spend much time. They might bounce, that kind of thing, right? They might come back to the browser, or sorry, back to the SERP and like do a search again. So it might have the wrong signals. So if you drive traffic to a page that isn't that doesn't have good behavioral signals, if you drive traffic to it, it's not going to do anything, right? So what you need to do is take a piece of content that's not designed to rank, that's almost designed to unrank somehow, that's just good, and drive traffic to it. So that's like because Google has already sampled the stuff. It's possible that if you produce a new piece of content, here's one thing that we do here's an important thing that's actually very important to understand about this behavioral stuff. People have noticed that it's difficult, like it takes longer to get a piece of content, a new piece of content to rank, right? So one of the key selling points of RivalFlow is that we help you improve the rankings of existing content, like improve existing content with AI. It's our tagline, right? And the reason is that moving your position on existing content is easier because why, right? Whoa,
That was so dramatic.
camera just did some things.
Because why?
Whenever I put my hands up, the camera will follow me and decides that it wants to follow me. Anyway, sorry about that. Sorry, Mile. Okay, so one of the benefits of improving existing content is that Google already has a sample, right? So they already understand the behavioral context of your page, and so if you make it better, then they already have a statistically significant sample. So we see this in ad networks all the time. If you we actually have a thing where Tree and I were talking about how there's like this sort of ramp up time on a new Google campaign, and especially if you're just starting out spending new money, right? So what happens is that Google will send you, or any ad network, Facebook or anything, is going to send you some amount of traffic. And then they measure to see what's happening. Is there any bad signals? Is it a scam? Is there like a high bounce rate? Does it have, they'll sample your page. Does it have a privacy policy? All these things. But they're going to send you a relatively small amount of traffic. And then they ramp it up over time. One of the things that they're testing is, can you pay? Like, they'll run some ads for you and then bill you. Are they able to like actually collect money from you? So if you've got a past experience with an ad network where you've already paid them, then your stuff ramps up faster. And if you've got a previous experience driving traffic to that site, then your ad campaign ramps up faster. So it's very similar with a new page that's organic. They're going to give you a little bit of traffic and see how it behaves, see how the users behave, like what's the behavioral signals that they're getting. So if you got a piece of content and it ranks like a little bit, they're going to send you, okay, it's relevant to this topic. We're going to put you in position 20 and like send some stuff to you. And you're going to get a few, 10 visitors, and then you're going to get, maybe 100 visitors. And it may take you 3-4 months potentially if it's not a really popular topic or whatever. It may take you 3 or 4 months to actually reach your sort of your level, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's possible that we could help Google have that signal sooner, right? We could potentially drive behavioral data to them, right? By essentially paying for it, right? So that's another way of so if you have a new piece of content and you know that it's going to be great, or it's a brand new site, it may be possible, this is actually best practice anyway, to drive paid traffic to it. And it may be the case that Google uses it. Maybe they can use that behavioral intent to understand how that page performs with its users.
Okay.
So I think that there's very strong evidence. We see that there's actually, in fact, a sandbox. We see that there's all this behavioral data, like meaning what happens after they click on the SERP when they go there. That's one, and then potentially the Chrome data of just visiting the page. So all of those things go into determining what ranks. And so I think that this clearly explains why you get more lift by improving existing content typically than when you launch something that's new. But the hack is that potentially you can make the stuff that's new find its actual natural level faster by driving traffic to it. Now, another way, like a really hacky way of driving that traffic, would be to drive those users to the SERP on your, like highlighting your particular item. So you might pay to send people to those special Chrome links, and then they could click through. And that would be an expensive-ish way, because some portion of them, it's like your funnel is gonna be leaky. You're gonna have some number of people that see your ads and don't click, and then you're gonna have some people that you drive to the SERP and then they're not gonna click on yours. So rather than just driving them directly to your page, it's gonna be leakier, like probably a lot leakier. But definitely that would produce the signal that you're looking for, right? Like you take that, drive them to the SERP, and then maybe 5% of them actually click on, or 10% or whatever, click on the link that you're trying to get them to. But I mean, you might be able to produce an ad, a display ad that tells them what to click on. I don't know. I've never seen it done. I'm just like talking more like about what could be done in order to. I think it might be cheaper to pay those services to send people, but also kind of cheesier, like this way, doing it this way, the user sees the result, they click the result, they want to get to the thing, as opposed to like you're just paying randos to like do stuff that really isn't. I mean, it's not real. Like,
Yeah.
But if you advertise and they find it interesting, that they'll probably. That's real. That's real. Advertising. Yeah. That's real intent.
I mean, that's a lot of interesting concepts. One, I've never seen an ad linked to the SERP. That would be
I don't even either.
insane.
I'm sure it's really jacked up. Somebody's probably going to be like, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." That's absolutely. I understand that perspective. It's like the SERP is personalized. It might completely not work. I completely get what you're saying.
But the intent is to get net new content, especially stuff that you're confident about, traction in any way possible. And, like advertising for content like that, and promoting traffic to it has kind of always been around. That's always been kind of a best practice thing. But with this leak, and specifically with the Chrome data, you're saying that it might be even more advantageous in a way we hadn't even conceived of, because we're getting those opening signals to Google faster through Chrome despite the SERP. Is that?
Yeah, actually, what you're talking about is way more practical and best practice than what I'm like. I'm like spewing essentially like this like hypothetical thing that maybe doesn't make any sense. But clearly, if you write like a really good piece of content, having a promotion cycle around it, knowing the audience that you want that to resonate with in advance makes perfect sense, right? So it's like take your content, break it into like social posts, like use AI to break into the social posts, like little snippets.
Yep.
Post those little things on various social networks, right? And I have them linked to that page. That traffic from those users might wind up improving your rankings, like because we always think of like, oh, we want to promote it, we want to do that, and the idea is maybe that's going to produce shares, and if those shares create backlinks, right? And the backlinks create the lift. But it also might be the case the actual traffic itself matters. And it probably is the case that the traffic itself matters. It also is the case that if you create branded traffic to your, like if you could kind of like make it so that it's like the RivalFlow helpful content report or whatever, or the RivalFlow, you know, gap analysis report or something like this, right?
Mhm.
People might search for that and then click on it and then send that signal. So that's like another way of doing it is to produce a sort of, what are you going to search for? So instead of like trying to rank on a really broad generic thing, it's like, and by the way, this is like one of those things that that Will Reynolds talks about in that same article is kind of like the value of a branded search relative to the branded of a generic search. Like that's what you actually are trying to get to happen.
Yeah.
Um, so naming it that and promoting it as such makes it so that if they're in X or whatever on their phone and they really want to see this thing in on their desktop, then they'll wind up going into their Chrome browser and like and searching for the, you know, the RivalFlow helpful content or RivalFlow content decay report or whatever,
Uh-huh.
and then that's what they get to, and that search, that's how you can kind of drive that that search driven behavior
Yeah.
as well.
Uh, just so
All
that
of
seems like breadcrumbs to kind of the nav boost, I guess, to get people to
Oh yeah.
no, not nav boost. That's a different thing. But it's breadcrumbs, so people like specifically Google your stuff, um, on a Chrome
Yeah.
browser.
Yeah, you could I hadn't really thought through the branded aspect of this, but I mean, but you know, like kind of like the real practical nuts and bolts aspect of what you're talking about is like is when you're building a piece of good content, like actually when you're building any piece of content, as long as it's, if you have an audience in mind, like when you're building it, you probably ought to have an audience in mind.
Mhm.
You can break that into social promotion pieces, which is kind of best practice anyway.
Yeah.
But what we kind of learned here is that that practice might have not just kind of like the share and backlink benefit,
Yeah.
but also potentially the direct ranking because of the actual traffic
Yeah.
and the behavior. But you know, it really um, matters how the behavior is. You know, so it actually won't really help rank. It just accelerates what's ultimately going to happen based on the quality and engagement, you know, and helpfulness of the content overall, you know?
Mhm. So how like it seems like a lot of maybe there isn't a good answer for this. Um, but it seems like there's a lot of scramble, a lot of anger. Like, I mean, that's kind of the state of Google right now, regardless. But how would someone take this or your hypothesis and be able to leverage it for their site, uh, more than using standard best practices?
Well, I mean, so I kind of gave you like the secret tricks, right? Like
Yeah,
which but so beyond my secret tricks, which I guess I could reiterate if you like.
sure.
It so so there's the three secret tricks, right? That I've kind of talked about in terms of leveraging the leveraging the behavioral signals.
Mhm.
The first one is that it's likely that the services that you can buy that just cause people to like search for your keyword and click on your site, they probably work, provided that Google doesn't detect them. They
Okay.
probably will eventually detect them because it's not really real, right? Um, and that's definitely a cat and mouse game that you probably aren't going to be able to win really very well. But go ahead, you know, really, I don't know how bad. I don't know if it's going to be damaging. It doesn't seem like it's probably going to be something that's damaging, but it might get ignored eventually. So you might go up in the ranks, and then they might detect what that was, and then it might go away. I think that it's unlikely that if you are to promote, so the second trick would be to promote traffic directly to your content And the idea is that the behavioral, like your dwell time and your engagement with the content that's picked up by Chrome might be a factor in the ranking. And so if you drive ad traffic or traffic from social media sites or whatever to that page, that behavioral data might help in the rankings, or it might help Google get a signal so that it understands that it's not like a terrible page or something, that it's at least that they can start delivering some traffic to it because it's safe, right? It's it's got but better than baseline, better than average, better than terrible stuff, right? So by driving traffic to it and using getting that signal from Chrome, that is almost certainly never going to do any harm. If you want the sort of mildly crazy hack, it would be to use one of the Chrome links that you can do that drives you directly to a part of content, and you could do that for the SERP for the keyword that you're searching for, and drive them directly to your to highlight your result, and then cause them to hopefully they click on it. That is kind of crazy, and probably super easy to detect, because that's really uncommon, and so if Google, but it also shows intent that I don't necessarily know is a bad signal, right? So would they ignore it if people were doing shady things with it? And then they might blanketly ignore it. They might ignore any traffic that's coming from let's say Twitter or X or whatever. Yeah. If there's a link that goes directly to the SERP and then somebody clicks from there, they might be like, nah, that's not, we're just going to ignore anything that comes from there. That seems like that's, or if it has one of those special links, they might be like, all this stuff is skeezy. So I don't think that that's necessarily, I don't really know. It probably is less likely to get ignored than the people that are when you're just paying people to click on your stuff. That is definitely not real. Yeah. This is maybe real. And of course, the surest fire, obvious thing is your strategy. So I've got 4, I guess. Yours is the best practice one. Break your content down into publishable things, publishable LinkedIn posts or Twitter or Facebook or whatever your channel is. You just break it into little chunks, publishable, make 1-minute videos, that kind of thing. That's best practice. That's going to get you your backlinks. That's going to get you your brand searches. That's going to get you your and ultimately maybe it'll get you the traffic, and that traffic signal might be the win. So that's an easy one to do. I mean, actually, it's kind of the hardest one to do. It's most expensive in a way, but with AI, dude, you can, it's like a prompt away. Really, no biggie. A lot of tools these days.
Yeah. Well, those are interesting. It seems like obviously we're gonna promote best practice and to do compelling net new content and to improve existing content, hopefully using AI tools like RivalFlow. But there with every leak and with everything that Google puts out there or we find, it's always kind of a scramble to see, well, what can we do with this? How can we turn this into our favor? And I don't think that this is any exception. I would be fascinated. Can we please test the add to the SERP? I want to know what that looks like. I just want to know what that looks like and how it functions.
Is, man, I know that'll work. Of course it's going to work. Does it work at scale? It'll work for us. I just don't know whether or not whether or not it's in any way profitable. That would definitely for sure work. If you needed to get something to rank, you could drive traffic to it. But then you're paying to have something rank, and is it worth it? Do you get an ROI on it? I don't really. I mean, basically the idea is that most people told me it's probably less expensive to just pay for those people to do this, to pay people to do the search, you
Yeah.
know? And in a way, that's kind of what you're doing, I guess. I guess that's kind of the thing, is that if you scroll somebody automatically to the thing, you're sort of artificially inflating the signal of like the click-through rate on your stuff.
Mhm.
And so Google probably should ignore that. I don't know that they do.
That's the thing.
Well,
It's such a crazy idea that maybe they
yeah.
don't, maybe they haven't
Yeah,
considered.
it's I mean, I'm not like in a rush to do it, so hey, you guys want to go crazy.
Put it in the comments below if you're doing this
Oh,
crazy harebrained
love,
brain scheme. Let us know. I can't wait to see it.
I'd love
Uh,
to see that too. Yeah, be
yeah.
what you know, another thing that we did learn though is that there's a lot of stuff that everybody you know, worries about. Like there's this I don't know where we're at collectively in the SEO community about doing sort of like backlink cleanup, right? That
Mhm.
was a big thing, you know? And
Yeah.
Google was always like, don't, yeah, do that. The links that are like toxic aren't really something you need to clean up.
Yeah.
They're just there, and you know, and so it seems that what happens is that they just get ignored. So like that's just, and actually that's the way that you would design it, right?
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
if you're building a system, you wouldn't be like, oh, you know what? I'm gonna look and see. I'm gonna penalize a site for having like negative, like links from sites that suck.
Hmm.
Well, apparently no. Apparently they just ignore those. You
Yeah.
know, ignore the low quality stuff. Now I didn't dig deep into that, and I'm not like Mr. Backlink master really. There may be some idiosyncrasies related to this where if, for example, you have like a lot of irrelevant stuff, like I don't know, porn backlinks or something to your business to business website or whatever, like
Yeah.
maybe it's diluting your sort of authority on something. That's possible. I'm not totally, you know, I'm not familiar with some of those things, but broadly speaking, there's like a lot of tools and a lot of kind of a lot of processes built around um, cleaning up your backlink profile and getting rid of toxic backlinks. And I
Hmm.
think that that might not be. I think that the evidence in this data, in this API, is that those things just get ignored. They're just
Yeah.
not really. You don't really need to do anything about them. You just, they're just part of the detritus of the internet, essentially. You know,
Yeah.
frankly, like anybody can put up a link on some generated blog that they did and try to like. I mean, I've looked through our like toxic backlinks, and it's like all of it is like our links, like links to our site, like peppered in to like almost give the page some like level of authority, and then they like stick in like these links to some other random crap. But like I don't know, like I think that Google ignores it. That's what the data seems to show there, or so I hypothesize.
Well,
You
that
got to
would seem,
really temper all of this stuff
yeah.
where we're just looking at an API documentation. I
Hmm.
mean, I'm a source code kind of guy, you know, and there, you know, when you get there was a Yandex leak, right? And that was a leak of the actual source code, and so you can know how a search engine works by like going through that uh, that source code. Um,
Hmm.
with an API that we don't even really necessarily know what it's actually used for, it's all it's super exciting, but it's also not necessarily anything that we know anything about.
Hmm. And that's kind of what Google has come out and said is like, hey, don't like this is legit. This is an actual leak. It happened. But if you put all of your eggs in this basket, that might not be the best plan for you, because things change and there's a lot of nuance here that you might miss. Um,
That's a good point. In this case, like, so a lot of cases, like, it's like, all right, I'm going to trust like that Google's perspective has some nugget of truth and kind of has like the other side, or like, or, you know, there's sort of like this, you know, in like journalism or whatever, there's like the both sidesisms or whatever. In this case, I feel like they're not like a great source of truth and wisdom on this. Given the, because a lot of the stuff that's like interesting about it is that, and some people feel you know, like, uh, I didn't know that like the concept of, it's funny because I'm so old school. I didn't know that like the concept of like a domain level authority was like Rand Fishkin's sort of original thought.
Okay.
And Mike King's article. So I don't know. We gave the background on this in early videos, but like Rand got like a like basically like a, I don't know, an email or whatever from like a guy. I forget the guy's name. And the guy had like this, knew where this content was, and like basically Rand did like a Zoom call with him, and then like decided to break the news. But he reached out to Mike King of iPullRank, and they sort of collaborated and basically did these dual releases. So Rand did his analysis, Mike did his analysis, and then basically published them at approximately the same time in a mildly, in definitely a coordinated fashion, all over the Memorial Day weekend. And so that's how that all came out. So my point with giving that information was I just gave you all the background information about how and when that came out, but I forget where I was going with the with it. Do you remember?
Oh shoot. So only
Can we rewind the Zoom?
no,
I've
we have to like close it first. But no, we can rewind our thoughts. So I was talking about we were done talking about Chrome. I was talking about wait, what the fuck?
I was talking about Yandex and that leak,
Yeah.
and how that was that source code.
And so what we
And
were talking about was Google coming out and saying, hey, like, yeah, this is real, but maybe don't put all your eggs in this basket.
yeah, don't put all your eggs in this basket. And I was talking, so the thing is, like, in this case, right?
Mhm.
Um, like, I'm all about, like, you know, kind of like trusting some level of like what Google has to say, because I think they have a perspective and they're like broadly, but in this case, um, part of the vindicating story is that, I mean, so we don't really, I don't necessarily know if I did this at the top of the story, but like, or at the top of this conversation, but like, the story here was broken by Rand Fishkin and Mike King of iPullRank and Rand's from SparkToro. And basically, what happened is there's a guy that had found this information like publicly online, and he reached out to Rand because Rand has a big audience, or whatever. I'm not fully sure, trusted or whatever. And so they did a Zoom call, and then Rand agreed to break it, and then he looped in Mike King, and anyway, so Mike King talks about the various things in his article. It's cool because Mike King talks about the various things that Rand had said over the years. Because Rand, remember, if you guys aren't super old school, Rand is the founder of SEO Moz, which became Moz, which is like as old school as it gets. Like, I mean, basically, when back in the day there was like SpyFu and there was SEO Moz. Okay, so like I don't know who. I feel like it was all like the 2006 timeframe, and so I remember SEO Moz, and like when they actually produced the first sort of backlink tool as soon as like the Yahoo. So old school, right? Old school. So
Mhm.
Rand has been saying things, and it's been kind of like a information source about like how Google works. And you know, like I didn't even really realize that he kind of had this like the domain, like overall domain score, like domain authority or domain strength or whatever, was kind of his thing.
Mhm.
That and Google always denied it. And so there's a variety of things that they've denied. They've denied behavioral use. They've obviously denied behavioral use of actual Chrome data, like real Chrome browser data, because for various sort of reasons they would maybe be incentivized to like not talk about that. But like the pitchforks and the mob and all that stuff, I'm not really into that whole thing. I kind of get that that's why they're invested in having like Google Analytics. Oh yeah, you get all that data. Chrome. All these things, they collect the data so that they can kind of produce a better search experience, a better advertising experience, or more targeted ads. It's all the whole model, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they have an incentive to not tell all of the information, and that's the most important truth in this, is that they do take these things at least into consideration. And some of those things they say that they take into consideration, and others they don't. Like, for example, they've always said that they don't take into account domain age, and they've always said that they don't sandbox things. But in this thing, in the API, there are those elements. So if you feed all of that stuff in to your machine learning, like I talked about, how that might work. You put in all of these properties and let it optimize for what you want. You don't really know what it's taking into account.
Mm-hmm.
It might be taking those things into account. Like, what I mean is, you as the people at Google don't necessarily know what the value of those ranking factors are, because it might change from page to page or neighborhood to neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Is kind of a cluster of, like it might be the case that there's neighborhood to neighborhood, let's call it like that. Like there's like clusters of websites that ranking factors may change. Like, obviously that's just kind of how that might work. Oh, the other thing that's interesting is that they have like these sort of marquee sites or something. I forget what it's called. Like, it's kind of like a whitelist. Like, basically when you have like elections and stuff like that, they want to basically make sure that this is the most important site. You can't usurp it.
Elections and COVID were big ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's kind of obvious, but it's also one thing that's interesting about it is it's like, oh, yeah, I feel like I might be able to build a search engine. You're like, this doesn't seem like, you think, oh, this is like, I gotta be really, maybe it's not that hard,
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like the signals aren't magical.
So there obviously has been, this was the biggest leak that has happened to Google. So of course we're gonna devour it and be reasonably up in arms, because Google has been lying to us, and that was kind of the statement made by the person who originally leaked it to Rand. He's like, this is why Google has been lying. Google has been lying to us for over a decade. Yeah. And so I understand why people in our industry, of course, are upset. You usually take you usually take a different approach, and that's the same, it's the same with me at this point. You usually take a different approach from a place that's maybe a little more empathetic toward Google, and probably toward their business side. It's like, well, can you explain some of that, and specifically dealing with this leak? You seem calm, you have some ideas about it, but you don't seem irate.
Okay, so first of all, you have to understand like how Google is structured, right? There's like leadership right at the top, but it's like, but a lot of the decision making and all that stuff happens at the sort of product manager level, and like sort of like the team level. So there's not like really necessarily like this overall coordinated thing. They have like a search liaison, and and it's just like the guy. It's like Danny Sullivan, right? So like, and So it's not, that's not the CEO, that's not like the corporate whatever like team. It's just like people that are trying to understand how the stuff works, that don't probably have a full understanding of how it works, because actually it's a black box.
Yeah.
Frankly, that's probably how it is. Um, and then there's sort of like some level of what are they actually feel like they're allowed to or empowered to say. And yeah, I mean, they definitely have not been as, they're not transparent, right?
Mhm.
um you know but I'm not like apologizing for them or whatever, but like it's, there's not like things in here that are like, oh my god, there's definitely things that are contradicting to like what is true, right? So people have been like, here's what it is, and they're like, no, I actually don't even necessarily know whether that they knew, right? They might be like, they might have honestly believed no. um I don't really know. I can't characterize those kind of communications actually. But like the way that I'm like kind of describing this thing to you is that there's it's fairly likely that you have a whole bunch of things that get calculated on like the page level, the site level, sort of like the behavioral level of users and so on. And they kind of get like thrown together in a lot of complexity. And it
Mhm.
might be the case that somebody actually doesn't know. And so I'm inclined to be generous to the individuals from that perspective. That said, it's also like there is somebody there that's like, nah, actually, what we just said there probably isn't true. That person might be a developer, and they might not be paying attention to what SEOs are talking about on like search engine land or whatever, or
Mhm.
SEO Twitter. And what like John Mueller is saying to them, or that Danny Sullivan is saying to them, like they might not know. It's totally possible in a company that's like that they just really don't know. That said,
Mhm.
I think that they are absolutely, there's definitely some things that they absolutely knew, because it's like broad strategic strokes
Yeah.
about like usage of like Chrome data and like and behavioral data, and who knows what else, in order to sort of like inform the SERP, right? In order to like train that stuff, right? Like there's things that they definitely had to have known, but like they also understand the 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 torch and pitchforks mentality of some of that stuff and how that can kind of blow up, and I think that they probably understand that stuff pretty well,
Mhm.
and really don't want to like call attention to it. um so there also might be something there where there's like, yeah, we don't really want to like enable you guys to like hack our stuff, you know. They maybe they don't want to tell you, hey, you know what you should do is you should pay people to click on your results, and then they'll move up. Maybe they don't want, maybe they're sort of like embarrassed of how kludgy it all is, or like, you know what I mean, like it's like, um uh I don't know what their incentive is. I don't know what their decision making is. There's reasons though that they might want to keep some of that stuff close to the vest. It also might be the case that they think that it's kind of like secret sauce, you know.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
They don't want to tell their competitors like how to reverse engineer, how to do a better job.
Mhm.
So that might be part of it.
That's been the feeling that I've been getting. I'm glad you express it in that way, because it definitely with Google it always feels like a secret, secret Coca-Cola formula. Like they got to keep that under wraps. They got to lie about it sometimes, especially when
Mhm.
they're under that much public scrutiny. Secret
Yeah.
sauce, that I love that.
I think that it's probably better for them to say we don't talk about that.
Okay,
That's
okay.
not a thing that I'm going that I'm going to talk about. Like I think that lying is um is a bad thing to do.
Uh-huh.
I think that it's reasonable to keep things to yourself, you know? And so, if somebody asks you about a thing, you can just be like, yeah, it's generally the way that the internals of our algorithm work isn't something that we're going to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't need to. Like, what we can tell you is that we try to be fair, or whatever, like, or that if you build better content, then it's going to rank higher. The end. Like, so in a way, this sort of community outreach angle that they have may have backed them into a corner where kind of like, they're like, well, I want to be forthcoming, but now that I'm willing to talk about all these other things, so like, it's like, you want to, oh yeah, you should optimize your title, you should make your content more helpful. So what do you think about, do you guys use, do you use the clicks on the SERP, or do you use the traffic to indicate to your, oh, that's something we don't talk about.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're saying yes, So there's like this rhetorical way that it can kind of being helpful for them may have backed them into a corner where they're like, well, if I say I don't talk about that, that's like I can neither confirm or deny, like
Yeah.
maybe that's where they're like, this is actually really important to us, and if I say no, then it gets me off the hook, and if I say I cannot confirm or deny, I really look like I'm kind of hiding something.
Yeah.
So that might be their jam.
That's so I wasn't going to bring this up, but like we're right there. We're right on the precipice. But like you don't get the same thing from KFC. They got their 13 secret herbs and spices. We know it's a secret. It's like fun to try and deconstruct it, but we don't bother them about it. We don't have press conferences being like, "Well, what are they, KFC? What are they?"
Mm-hmm.
But I think the difference between KFC and Google is that Google, by nature, and why it won the search engine wars is because of trust, is because as users, we're like, Google is the best. I can trust Google. It will answer my questions the most correctly and the quickest, quicker than Ask Jeeves, than any number Alta Vista.
Yeah.
Google, I can trust.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, like, especially recently
Yeah.
with AI and with this and with everything, that foundational thing, like, I think they were trying to stick with that foundational thing, and now that foundation may or may not be crumbling, or may have always been crumbling. um so that's the difference between Google and Kentucky Fried Chicken. But let's say they've backed themselves into this corner and people are losing trust in Google, is what I've been hearing and experiencing too. Like, just Google it is starting to become a joke, because just Google it sometimes means and find out what happens, instead of get the right answer. That's what it used to mean. It doesn't
Interesting.
necessarily mean that now. With all of that, what do you think when you see this stuff and you see the torches and pitchforks? What does that mean for our industry?
Interesting question. So, like, here's the thing: is that we are in a bit of an echo chamber, right? We're kind of like, we may have like something like a curse of knowledge, or we're just sort of like in this thing, uh, like too, closely. Like, we may be observing it from like, from like the inside in a weird way.
Yeah.
And so the people that are getting annoyed might be, like the the sort of SEO class, and like kind of like the PPC people, a little bit of like this kind of like their core influencer audience, and that definitely can go a scale out. I don't know how this relates to like the their search audience, like I
Yeah.
actually don't know. Like, I'm probably not the person that has the pulse for that, like I know what I think, and on my take is always probably more charitable. I just am like less likely to just call somebody out and call them a liar or whatever, than to just
Yeah.
be like, they're just doing what humans sometimes do when they do things that are not like good. uh
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, like, but yeah, that's for the, I don't know, dude. It's really difficult for me to predict where things go.
Okay.
Like it's hard. Predicting the future is something that I like to do, but when you're trying to predict human behaviors at scale, that's a toughie, dude. It's a really
Mhm.
toughie. It's you know, we're in a bit of a technological spike change potentially of things. So we'll see how it works. I'm hesitant to make prognostications about human behaviors and such. It's tough.
Well, if it's okay with you, I think that's what I'm going to do on my next Patrick's Corner video is just make a shitload of assumptions that I
Yeah.
probably am not qualified
Oh,
for.
oh.
But
See, the irony is that all we did here in this whole thing is like, well, we got some documents about some API.
yeah.
Let's extrapolate. Which I'm totally willing to do. Let's extrapolate on like what the technological implications of something are, but like in terms of like humans, like, well, that's a toughie, you know. I don't
Yeah.
even really want to like infer their intentions exactly, and um, you know, people doing their job or being evil or doing, I don't, there's just like something.
I always do appreciate these conversations with you, though, because I mean, it's definitely echo chamber, and obviously anger is going to rise to the top of a lot of
Mhm.
this stuff. That usually isn't my internal process, and having you, like, I'll come to you and ask you, like, well, what do you think the nefarious intent that Google had behind this? And you're like, I think they're just a bunch of nerds. Like,
Mhm.
I think they might just be like normal people doing normal people things,
Yeah.
and they might not know. And that's a big thing that I'm taking from this conversation is not to think of Google and all of its participants as one giant all-knowing entity, but just people being told to do different tasks. And the ever-changing nature of it and the ever-changing nature of the Google algorithm in general. When leaks like this come out, maybe it's not as earth-shattering as we all want it to be.
And like a lot of these things that people talk about as definitely signals for ranking signals for Google
Mhm.
are like ranking factors for Google are like, it'd be weird if they didn't look at some of the stuff, evaluate it whether or not it's a good signal, you know. Domain age, does that actually matter? Can we compare that to like other things? Does it actually, is it a strong ranking signal? I suspect that it's not that strong of a ranking signal, um, but how do you know what it is? Because they may not actually know themselves if they are actually truly using sort of like um, uh, machine learning in the way that like we kind of think that they probably do.
Mhm.
Um, Letting it select its own signals in its own clusters and so on. That's, um, so the thing is that this might be like a developer API where you can just kind of like say, oh, well, let's look at the domain age, and, compare it to some other things and see if that makes any difference. Like, let's do it. Let's use it to sort of train and compare and test some like ranking systems.
Oh, okay. So this could have,
Yeah, it doesn't have to be an actual input. It could be just something that you use as kind of like as for development only, for sure.
yeah.
Like that's like um that's part of the uncertainty aspect of it. Yeah, for sure. And I honestly don't know what would happen if we had the code. Like, what if we had all the source code for all the things? It wouldn't necessarily make it like, it would make it a lot more clear, how things would be weighted. But if it actually is pushing things into ultimately an algorithm, then you'd be like, you don't know anything about how the algorithm works until you have the data, and that's the crazy thing about this exciting thing about that stuff, is that it's really like if you take like the code for an LLM, right?
Mhm.
For like GPT-4, if you take the code, it's very simple, basic, straightforward, relatively straightforward code for an LLM. You look at it and you look at it, right? And you're
Mhm.
like, oh, I can see what it's doing. And it's kind of like doing what like autocomplete does, but
Yeah.
then you just push a crap load of data through it. And then it becomes like, and then you're like, I think it's actually smarter than me, you know, and That's just like how algorithms work, is that you have to push a whole bunch of, you have to give their their interestingness occurs when you give them a lot of data. So we might have the source code for what Google does, look at it and be like, aha, they're using this. And then they push it through a simple algorithm. And you're like, I can see what's going on here. There's like nodes that are connecting, and that's kind of how, like, sort of like these mind, like neural network things work. And it's like, oh, look, I see this, this like little neuron simulation is connecting to this neuron simulation using like a simulated synapse. And you're like, it's hard to know what it's actually going to go do, when it goes through all of its layers. And that's kind of the tricky thing about all of it. And also maybe part of the reason why they don't know or whatever.
Yeah. Well, that is fascinating and enlightening. It's I really hope people use some of these. I really hope people have ads leading to the SERP. I just wanna see what that looks like. I just want to know. I just want to know now.
It'd be interesting
You
to find,
can't
yeah.
plant that seed in my head and have me not think about it. Um, well, Mike, as always, I very much appreciate your time and talking with me about the leak, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes of it and what our next conversation is.
Right on, dude. It's great to be here again, of course, and always super fun to hang out. So we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
All
Thanks,
right.
Mike.
Later, dude.